Allahumma salli ala sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa baraka wa sallim. Yang amat berbahagia Tun Ahmad Saji bin Abdul Hamid, Chairman Institute of Islamic Understanding Malaysia, IKIM. Yang berbahagia Datuk Dr. Azizan binti Baharudin, Director General IKIM. Yang berbahagia Profesor Datuk Dr. Awam Bulgiba bin Awam Mahmud, Professor Department of Social and Preventive Medicine, Faculty of Medicine, University of Malaya. Yang berbahagia Profesor Dr. Ainul Jaria binti Maidin, Profesor Ahmad Ibrahim Kuliah of Laws, International Islamic University Malaysia, IIUM. Yang berusaha Mr. Ahmad Razib bin Muhammad, Manager, Malaysian Industry Government Group for High Technology, MITE. Yang berusaha Madam Nuriah binti Harun, Deputy Director, Ethics and Value Development Program Sector, Islamic Education Division, Ministry of Education Malaysia. Yang berusaha Mr. Azwan bin Baharudin, Country Managing Director, Accenture Malaysia. Yang berbahagia Dr. Rezal Khairi bin Ahmad, Chief Executive Officer, Nano Malaysia Berhad. Yang berusaha Mr. Iskandar Mirza bin Muhammad Yusof, Senior Director, Tourism Malaysia. Distinguished panelists, observers, media representatives, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah, it gives me great pleasure to welcome everybody to the expert consultation with the theme Covid-19 Islamic Responses, organized by the Institute of Islamic Understanding Malaysia, IKIM. Let us begin our program today with the recitation of the Ummul Kitab, Al-Fatiha. Ladies and gentlemen, today's expert consultation is organized as an effort by IKIM to address the concerns of the COVID-19 pandemic from the perspective of Islam. The objectives for this program are as follows: to seek ways, means and measures in the area of governance through science and technology, to provide understanding on religious responsibilities towards preservation of 5 key elements in the Maqasid Sharia in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, to highlight religious perspectives and ethics in containing and mitigating social and economic effects of the pandemic, to gain insight into the current problems faced in education and how digitalization through online classes and meetings are paving innovative ways in pedagogy, and lastly, to discuss other current issues related to COVID-19 pandemic in order to provide constructive and sustainable solutions to the identified problems. Therefore, we are grateful to have 7 distinguished panelists to provide inputs for our discussion today. Each panelist will bring their valuable experience to provide insights to address the issue of COVID-19. Ladies and gentlemen, to begin our program today, it is my great honor and pleasure to invite Yang Amat Berbahagia Tun Ahmad Saji bin Abdul Hamid, Chairman of IKIM, to deliver his thematic address. Yang amat berbahagia Tun, the floor is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Para pakar yang nama-namanya telah pun disebut oleh saudara moderator dan pendengar-pendengar sekalian. Bersyukur kita kepada Allah Subhanahu wa taala. Oleh kerana dengan limpah kurnia, inayah dan riayahnya, kita dapat menyempurnakan muzakarah pakar menerusi online pada pagi ini. Pada tarikh 18 Mac 2021, iaitu esok, akan genaplah setahun pelaksanaan Perintah Kawalan Pergerakan PKP. Atas sebab itu, penganjuran muzakarah pakar ini dilihat tepat pada masanya, memandangkan kita sudah setahun berada dalam pelbagai fasa PKP. apabila pandemik Covid-19 melanda dunia sejak awal tahun 2020, tindak balas menurut Islam ialah merujuk kepada Al-Quran dan Al-Hadis untuk memperolehi panduan dan bimbingan. Bagi umat Islam, apa jua malapetaka datang menimpa adalah dengan kehendak Allah Azza wa Jalla yang menguji manusia dengan tujuan menentukan siapakah antara hamba-hambanya kekal tabah dengan iman dan sabar. Allah Subhanahu wa taala berfirman dalam surah Al-Baqarah ayat 155 hingga 156 yang bermaksud, dan sungguh akan kami berikan cubaan kepadamu dengan sedikit ketakutan, kelaparan, kekurangan harta, jiwa dan buah-buahan, dan berikanlah berita gembira kepada orang-orang yang sabar, iaitu orang-orang yang apabila mereka ditimpa musibah, mereka mengucapkan, sesungguhnya kami adalah milik Allah dan kepadanya jualah kami kembali. Saudara-saudari Islam, dalam sepotong hadis diriwayatkan bahawa Rasulullah SAW pernah bersabda, mafhumnya ia iaitu wabak ialah azab yang dengannya segelintir kaum dihukum, dan sebahagiannya iaitu penyakit kekal ada, dan ia sesekali muncul. Maka sekiranya kamu mendengar tentang tersebarnya wabak di sesuatu tempat, maka janganlah kamu masuk, dan sekiranya kamu sudah berada dalam kawasan iaitu penularan wabak tersebut, justru janganlah kamu keluar darinya. Sahih Al-Bukhari, hadis nombor 6974. Saudara-saudari sekalian, dengan izin dalam bahasa Inggeris, today's pandemic requires us to face an unseen enemy, Covid-19 virus, which lurks in our midst and strikes when we become complacent and unmindful. However, the unseen enemy is now known, detected by medical doctors and scientists. We are told about the symptoms, the signs, and indications of the unseen enemy's presence. Through path-breaking reforms in medical science and technology, several countries have innovated polymerase chain reaction (PCR) and other rapid test methods to screen people and detect infections. The current situation needs people to obey and give their loyalty to those in authority. Firman Allah Subhanahu wa taala dalam surah An-Nisa ayat 59 yang bermaksud, wahai orang-orang yang beriman, taatlah kamu kepada Allah dan taatlah kamu kepada Rasulullah dan kepada ulil amri, iaitu orang-orang yang berkuasa dari kalangan kamu. Kemudian, jika kamu berbantah-bantah ataupun berselisihan dalam sesuatu perkara, maka hendaklah kamu mengembalikannya kepada Allah dan Rasul. Allah dan Rasulnya, jika kamu benar beriman kepada Allah dan hari akhirat. Demikian adalah lebih baik bagi kamu dan lebih elok pula kesudahannya. Since the outbreak of the pandemic, the authorities have issued standard operating procedures, SOPs, rules and regulations which affect all sectors and with crisis policies, including restricted movement, quarantine, and lockdown. Today, the implementation of worship, ibadah, are subject to standard operating procedures, which include pilgrimages, the Hajj and the Umrah, in fact also the congregational prayer, Salat Jamaah, festivities such as Eid, marriages, burial attendance, Thanksgiving, birthday celebration of the Holy Prophet, Maulid Rasul, and the celebration of Islamic New Year, Ma'al Hijrah. Pada hari ini, kursus wajib pra-perkahwinan boleh diadakan secara dalam talian atau online. Penularan wabak Covid-19 telah memberi kesan terhadap perkembangan pelaksanaannya. Ada negeri-negeri yang tidak bersedia melaksanakan secara video conference melalui aplikasi dalam talian seperti Google Meet, Webex dan Zoom. Turut terjejas adalah kumpulan-kumpulan sasar seperti orang kurang upaya, pelajar-pelajar yang sedang mengikuti pengajian di luar negara dan juga individu yang mempunyai kekangan masa. Bagaimanakah pihak-pihak Islam, pihak-pihak berkuasa Islam yang berkuasa hendak memperbaiki sistem online bagi kursus seperti kursus pra-perkahwinan pada hari ini? Saudara-saudari sekalian, satu daripada norma baru berikutan dengan pandemik Covid-19 adalah work from home, WFH. Isu-isu yang berbangkit daripada norma baru ini adalah bagaimana hendak memastikan supaya hubungan antara ketua-ketua pejabat dan anak buahnya kekal harmoni. Isu kedua adalah tercetusnya pelbagai tekanan perasaan dan kerisauan dalam kalangan masyarakat, termasuk para pekerja. Kehilangan pekerjaan, hilang punca pendapatan, pergolakan rumah tangga, cubaan membunuh diri dan sebagainya adalah antara pelbagai gejala dan isu psikososial yang perlu ditangani. Apakah reaksi pihak-pihak yang berkuasa untuk menyediakan intervensi psikologi dan perkhidmatan kaunseling berasaskan kepada syariat Islam terhadap isu-isu ini? Allah Subhanahu wa taala berfirman mengenai hal ini dalam surah Al-Baqarah ayat 153 yang bermaksud, wahai sekalian orang yang beriman, mintalah pertolongan bersama sabar dan solat, kerana sesungguhnya Allah bersama-sama orang-orang yang sabar. Saudara-saudari sekalian, Covid-19 telah juga mencetuskan proses pembelajaran dalam talian. Isu yang berbangkit mengenai pembelajaran di rumah adalah sedangkan pelajar itu terbeban dengan tugasan dan pelbagai arahan daripada pensyarah atau guru, pelajar juga diminta menjalankan tugas-tugas di rumah. Ada pelajar-pelajar yang mengalami kemurungan dan tekanan. Adakah didapati dalam pembelajaran Islam cara-cara bagi menangani masalah-masalah ini? Saudara-saudari sekalian, berkenaan pembelajaran secara dalam talian ini juga terdapat 3 isu kesihatan utama yang timbul berkaitan kesihatan fizikal dan kesihatan mental. Pertama adalah kesan fizikal akibat penggunaan komputer atau gadget secara berpanjangan. Kesan ini termasuklah masalah kepada mata, otot dan tulang akibat kurang pergerakan dan terlalu lama berada di hadapan komputer ataupun gadget. Keadaan ini mewujudkan satu keadaan sedentary yang tidak sihat akibat tidak aktif untuk satu tempoh yang lama. Kedua, proses pembelajaran di rumah menyebabkan pelajar berasa bersendirian ketika menuntut ilmu. Perkara ini boleh menyebabkan tekanan dalam bentuk social isolation ketika belajar. Ketiga, sikap melewat-lewatkan kerja dalam menyiapkan tugasan. Apabila pembelajaran dijalankan secara dalam talian, pelajar mempunyai kecenderungan untuk menyiapkan tugasan pada saat akhir kerana tidak ada pengawasan oleh guru seperti di sekolah. Perkara ini jika tidak diatasi, berpotensi mewujudkan satu tabiat yang tidak baik, iaitu suka bertangguh. Apakah cara-cara yang boleh dilaksanakan untuk memastikan agar kesan ke atas kesihatan fizikal dan mental ini dapat ditangani? Saudara-saudari sekalian, Covid-19 telah memupuk kerjasama yang kukuh antara agama dengan sains yang tidak boleh dipisahkan untuk memastikan bahawa masjid masih boleh digunakan untuk ibadat. Penggunaan hasil sains menerusi disinfeksi berkala telah dijalankan dan penggunaan alat menyukat suhu telah menjadi amalan sekarang. Pembayaran zakat boleh ditunaikan menerusi online. Di sini saya memohon muzakarah pakar ini menyediakan satu sinarai amalan dan tuntutan agama yang boleh disempurnakan menerusi alat teknologi, iaitu secara online. Saudara-saudari sekalian, sekali lagi dengan izin dalam bahasa Inggeris. With the COVID-19 infections continuing at the current high rate, teaching and learning online in schools and universities have begun to be part of our education system. I believe that the online teaching and learning has provided a number of advantages, including course materials accessibility, flexible scheduling, improved time management skills, and increasing the level of self-mastery and discipline. Online learning helps students to develop technological skills, deepen their knowledge of the functions of the internet, doing typing and creating software programs. Many students are now considered to be digitally literate. Based on the advantages of online teaching and learning, can this modern medium be the way forward for the religious education sector? Can the learning and teaching of Al-Quran, Al-Hadith, and Fatwa be conducted online? Ladies and gentlemen, the COVID-19 pandemic has helped us to innovate our physical, digital, and technological infrastructures. In this digital era, the critical imperative is to enhance our capacity to think and interact. What is the plan to create and develop a future's Islamic digital literacy for a better understanding of Islam? Saudara-saudara sekalian, I hope you would kindly respond to the various challenges which I have just listed. Dalam konteks memberikan kefahaman Islam berkenaan COVID-19, Institut Kefahaman Islam Malaysia, IKIM, baru-baru ini telah menerbitkan 2 buah buku yang mengumpulkan penulisan para penyelidik IKIM yang tersiar di akhbar-akhbar sepanjang tahun 2020 yang lalu. Judul-judul buku itu ialah 1. Islam dan Wabak, pengajaran daripada COVID-19, dan buku kedua, Islam and Pandemics, Lessons from COVID-19. Penerbitan 2 judul buku ini diharapkan dapat membantu menyebarkan kefahaman sebenar tentang pandangan Islam terhadap pengurusan wabak seperti yang kita hadapi hari ini. Muzakarah pakar pada hari ini juga menjadi satu usaha berterusan oleh IKIM untuk membincangkan isu berkenaan pandemik ini dari perspektif Islam. Kita berdoa semoga muzakarah pakar ini dirahmati oleh Allah Subhanahu wa taala. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Yang Amat Berbahagia Tun, for that thematic address. And it is hoped that this insightful address, I will sure that it will guide much of the discussion for the remainder of the morning, inshallah. Ladies and gentlemen, the expert consultation will continue with the deliberations from our distinguished panelists. Allow me to remind each panelist is given 10 minutes to provide their inputs to the discussion. To begin our discussion, I would like to start with Yang Berbahagia, Professor Datuk Dr. Awang Bulgiba bin Awang Mahmud, Professor at Department of Social and Preventive Medicine, Faculty of Medicine, University of Malaya. Yang Berbahagia Datuk Prof, the theme of our discussion is COVID-19 Islamic responses. What are the steps and initiatives introduced by the authorities to tackle the pandemic, and how are they in line with Islamic teaching? The floor is yours, Yang Berbahagia Datuk Prof.
Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much for inviting me. Now, I just have a few slides to share, and then after that, perhaps then later on we can have a discussion on what the Malaysian health response has been like for COVID-19. Now, as of today, there are more than 120 million COVID-19 cases which have been reported. I say reported because there are probably more cases than this. Anyway, there's a lot of underreporting as far as COVID-19 is concerned. There have been approximately 2.7 million COVID-19 deaths, and remarkably, there are already more than 350 million COVID-19 vaccine doses which have been administered worldwide. The number is probably increasing just as we speak. And various strategies have been carried out by different countries. Before the advent of the vaccines, these interventions have been largely what is called non-pharmaceutical interventions. And the success has been very variable, and it's difficult to gauge the success or failure of these measures because countries which have succeeded in getting the COVID-19 pandemic under control may later find themselves unable to cope with the pandemic. Prior to March last year, the COVID-19 epidemic was solely under the purview of the Ministry of Health in Malaysia. And as we know, in March, the second wave of infections and the Sri Petaling cluster happened. And the overall management of the pandemic then was taken over by the National Security Council. And the first movement control order, or MCO 1.0, as some people might say, was declared on 16th March 2020 and took effect on 18th March 2020. So we are almost a year since the first MCO was declared. What happened on March 16? On March 16, Malaysia recorded 190 new infections on that day, which was the highest in ASEAN, far higher than any other country in ASEAN. Then that prompted the resort to movement control order. Now, there have been many applications of the movement control order in various forms, sometimes a little bit confusing. Movement MCO 1.0, which was highly restrictive, occurred from 18 March to 3rd May 2020. This was followed by the Conditional Movement Control Order, where there were easing of restrictions from the 4th of May to 9th of June, and the Recovery Movement Control Order, where almost all the restrictions except for international travel were removed, occurred from 10 June to 31st December 2020. After that, there were applications of various forms of the movement control order in various places. So for example, the CMCO was for certain states like Sabah, Selangor, KL, and Putrajaya from October to December. And then the entire peninsula was taken over by the CMCO up to the 6th of December and extended in various districts in Selangor and so on. Now the second MCO or MCO 2.0 was applied in some states from 13 January to 4th of March, followed by the CMCO. And I've been told that all these movement control orders have been based on the application of two acts, Act 342, which is the Prevention and Control Infectious Diseases Act 1988, and Act 344, which is the Police Act of 1967. In Sarawak, they've also applied the Protection of Public Health Ordinance 1999. This is what I've been told, but I'm not a legal expert, and I can't really comment on how these acts or the ordinance was applied in various places. Now, MCO 1.0 is containment. This is in line with what has been used in the past by many Islamic medical scholars, which is quarantine and trying to reduce the contact between people. There were a lot of travel and business restrictions, social and religious gathering restrictions. There was aggressive contact tracing and testing, and the RTK or rapid test kit, antigen test kits were bought. Several secondary hospitals were set up. The quarantine centers were set up. More than 400 public colleges and institutions were gazetted as quarantine centers. And personal protective equipment and ventilator procurement were made on a very large scale. And a lot of elective procedures, surgeries, and so on were postponed. The armed forces assisted the police in enforcing the MCO, and many ministries set up task forces. So what were the effects of this MCO 1.0? The reproduction number, which is a very often quoted reproduction number, or the RT, the reproduction number at time T, declined to less than 1. The doubling time increased tremendously, meaning that the rate of new infections slowed down. The case fatality rate in the first MCO was kept low at around 1.4%, in contrast to many developed nations which had reached between 5 to 10%. And on 18 April, for the first time since the MCO 1.0 was introduced, only 85 new COVID-19 cases were reported. It was the first time that it fell to double digits during the MCO. But the economic effects were felt by almost everyone. GDP growth slowed down in the Q1 and shrank in Q2, and the government responded by introducing economic stimulus packages. Now, during the CMCO and the RMCO, most businesses were allowed to open except for entertainment outlets, sports, hair and beauty salons, and travel restrictions were generally lifted except for international travel, which is still in force today. And some easing on social and religious gatherings have been announced with limits on the congregation size and SOPs to be followed by mosques, churches, and temples. And schools were reopened, starting with the 5th and 6th forms, and the 3rd and 4th stimulus packages were announced by the government. Now, the MCO 2.0 has just ended. This was prompted largely by the Sabah state elections. I spoke on this many times in the media. The fact that there was no proper quarantine for returnees from Sabah until about 27th of September, by which time it was a little bit too late. And at that time when I was looking through the data, I was horrified to find that 1/3 of the clusters in Selangor in October 2020 were actually linked to Sabah. And more than 500 of these returnees from Sabah had tested positive. So Sabah's cases exploded, with doubling time reduced to just 7 to 10 days, starting from October. And consequently, other states in the peninsula started having increasing numbers from December 2020 onwards as a result of spread from Selangor to all the other states. And the MCO 2.0 was introduced in some states from January to March this year. The only confusion is for epidemiologists like myself, was the MCO 2.0 for containment or mitigation? So there was a little bit of confusion there for us because it wasn't a very clear strategy. Now, under Islamic principles, I think we have to try to prevent the disease as far as possible. And the immunization program that the government has introduced in February this year is part of that prevention program. At the beginning of this immunization initiative, there was some confusion about whether we were going to start our immunization program or not. As until 18th of September 2020, which was the deadline for the signing of the COVAX agreements, which is WHO initiated immunization program. The country had not made any firm formal commitment to COVAX, but it was announced the following day that Malaysia would participate in COVAX. But there were a lot of bilateral efforts to try to purchase vaccines, and the country has already signed agreements with Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Sinovac, and the Gamaleya Institute for vaccine purchases from November until January this year. A joint committee between MOSTI and the Ministry of Health was set up to plan and purchase vaccines, and under which there are a lot of other committees. And the National COVID-19 Immunization Program, which has kicked off, is now overseen by an immunization task force called the COVID-19 Immunization Task Force. I happen to head the Independent COVID-19 Vaccination Advisory Committee, which gives independent advice to the JKJAV, and all of us in this independent committee are academics. We consist of 2 epidemiologists, 1 immunologist, 1 virologist, a health economist, occupational health physician, infectious disease specialist, pharmacoeconomist, and an applied ethicist. And on 21st February, the first of the vaccines, the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, arrived in Malaysia. And on the 24th of February, as you can see here, the Prime Minister is being injected. The National COVID-19 Immunization Program began. There have been other responses by the authorities. For example, health professionals work with IT personnel to develop apps. 2 such apps which were used on a national scale in Malaysia, MySejahtera and MyTrace. MyTrace is probably no longer in use, but MySejahtera has expanded its functions. Several other states started their own apps. There were, of course, health care institutions which had its own app. There were concerns about Act 709, which is the Personal Data Protection Act, with the use of data in these apps. And but a number of other policies were not clearly stated at this point in time. The food security policy was not really clearly stated. Mental health policy has not been outlined very well. But otherwise, I think the other policies are stated. So that's all from me. Thank you very much. Back to you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Yang Berbahagia Datuk Prof, for the valued perspective on the policies. I would like to move now to our second panelist, Yang Berbahagia Professor Dr. Ainul Jariah binti Maidin, Professor at Ahmad Ibrahim Kuliah of Laws, IIUM. Prof, in light of the responses mentioned by Yang Berbahagia Datuk Prof Awang just now, what are the laws and rules introduced by the government to manage the pandemic, and what are the challenges in implementing them?
Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum. Many thanks to the IKIM team and Tuan Ahmad Sarji for organizing this session. And I would like to share briefly. Prof. Awang had actually shared some of the initial ideas that I wanted to share. Thank you, Prof. Especially on the policies and legal measures. But I will go zoom in straight to the legal measures introduced. Okay, let me just. The legal. Can the slide be seen? Okay. The legal measures in response to COVID-19 pandemic introduced by the Malaysian government, and whether it is Sharia compliant or in line with the Islamic perspective. I would like to quote Tun Hamid, our former Chief Justice. I love his ideas and views. Tun said, if any law made by the government, which though it doesn't have the term Sharia affixed to the particular piece of law, but as long as it's in compliance with Sharia and the needs of the Maqasid, it meets the needs of Maqasid Sharia, then these laws can be considered as Sharia compliant. Okay. We know that the COVID-19, all of us, I mean, when the child will say that he's very well aware about COVID-19. The COVID-19 pandemic reached our shores on 25th January 2020, when a case was reported, an imported case actually from Wuhan, China. And the first fatality was reported on the 17th of March 2020. Hence the government, our Prime Minister at the time, Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin, had no choice but to declare movement control order. And this movement control order was made under the Prevention and Control of Infectious Diseases Declaration of Infected Local Areas Order 2020, or abbreviated as PCID order, and the Police Act 1967. The MCO order, I mean, there's so many variation now, MCO 10, MCO 20, CMCO. We just kept, I mean, I lost track of all those. As far as I know, I'm staying home safely, not infecting anyone, and following the law closely. So the order was made on the 16th of March 2020 and came into effect or commenced on 18 March 2020, where we had to observe total lockdown. I mean, it came as a shock to everyone, panic buying. You know, Malaysians are not used to this. And of course, there were many defiance, yet majority of the population complied with this MCO order. Then later on, in October, after Singapore and many other countries passed the law, we introduced the temporary measures for reducing the impact of coronavirus disease 2019, Act 2020, or called COVID-19 Act, which came into effect on October 23rd, 2020. So this particular law, there are many, as usual, every piece of law will have its weaknesses and strengths. So this law was made with a combination of input from academia, from ministry officers, and various sectors got together. It's actually not done by one particular, not done by the 80 chambers by itself, but with input from Health Ministry, Housing Ministry, basically to help to see how to reduce the impact, especially the economic impact. Because when we introduced the movement lockdown, everybody had no choice but to lock down. So this particular COVID-19 Act is actually very timely, and it came into effect to help the people. But before the introduction of that, we had the moratorium for payments. Okay. If you look at the PCID order or MCO order, the order is, I mean, this is what I read, it is a cordon sanitaire implemented as a preventive measure by the federal government. So as a preventive measure, it reduces the movement of people to contain. From the legal perspective, we put regulatory measures. We based on the scientific, like Prof. Awang was talking about scientific measures. And for us, we have to contain. How do we contain this? Because the COVID-19 virus is gazetted as a life-threatening microbial under the first schedule of the PCID Act 1988. So it's a very, very important announcement that we need to take care. So the DG of Health, our Tan Sri Dr. Hisham, was emphasizing that the order could be very helpful to control the spread of the virus. In fact, we see him every day on television. This is the information relayed by Tan Sri and also our Majlis Keselamatan Negara is to prevent fake news. There's also another mechanism of control to make sure we get the authentic news, because fake news are spreading, and also we wanted to make sure we don't rely on fake news. So we had to choose this method because in China, it proved that isolating the infected people and social distancing helped to contain the pandemic. I believe in this very well. However, there were still, many people who were against, who did not comply with the order. So briefly, Prof. Awang had touched on this as well. These are the restrictions, about 15 restrictions imposed on all of us. This is from Bernama infographics issued by National Security Council. Now we are very particular about how we source our material because we have to be very, very careful. So we are very well aware about this. Even the man on the street is aware about this with the mask, SOPs. SOPs are actually part of law. When a minister makes any regulation, although it may not go to parliament, once it's gazetted, it becomes law to be enforced and to be complied with by the people. So this is very, very important, and it's available as a public information. So the common violations, yes, the violations are also very, very rampant, and of course penalties, and we also read a lot about penalties not being fair, unjust. Leave it that way, but these are the common violations. So now we have the new law, the COVID-19 Act. So that order is still on, and we still have to observe all the limitations and restrictions. So with the COVID-19 Act 2020, the measures introduced to overcome some impacts, not all, but to alleviate mostly contractual aspect, contractual disputes. So very, very interesting. Our government quickly, for me as a law and policy person, I admire our government very much, despite whatever people speaks about it, but possibly we have some weaknesses in enforcement and implementation. That's why I see the weakness. Otherwise, we have very good law-making system and also good law. So this particular law wanted to help with the uncertainties in the contractual disputes, and also to reduce financial and social impacts. Because we know we cannot simply allow businesses to shut down, be sued, houses to be foreclosed, loans to be foreclosed, because in the long run it will have impact on the economy. So COVID-19 Mediation Center was established. It's very, very commendable. The government put aside about 9 million ringgit to help resolve disputes using mediation. Mediation is a very proven concept under the old system. Under the Malay culture, we had the penghulu, we had the Indian panchayat. Yeah, very, very easily resolved, speedily, amicably, and cheaper. And mediation center was established under the Ministry of Law, and disputes are resolving speedily and amicably, and win-win situation. Mediation is very important because it provides win-win situation. So what are the areas that tackle under the law, the COVID-19 law Act? Housing issues, housing development. When there's a delay in delivery, we have late delivery claims. Then we also have, rushing through. Lawyers, you can't give them 10 minutes. When you give them 10 minutes, they fumble. Then we are looking at defect liability period. Defect liability period, claim, how to calculate the defect liability. These are very important measures because we need to, when we look at housing, defect liability is to protect the housing development industry. We have a very unique housing sector, housing policy, which to me, let me share, it is one of the best in the world. I get invited for United Nations programs on housing, so everyone always commend Malaysian housing policy is very, very good. Hire purchase schemes, to make sure the property owners will not take possession of the property on hire purchase between the given duration. Then warrant of distress, not to evict tenant, insolvency, bankruptcy, and also we're looking at contractual obligations, inability of parties to perform contractual obligation when they lock down and day-to-day business people, how to meet the commitment. So the law to me, as it is quite sufficient because it is a temporary measure. We cannot put this as a permanent measure because this will affect international business relations as well. So this is the law. And are they Sharia compliant? When we look at the implementation of MCO, yes, very much we look at the Sharia, objectives of Sharia, like Maqasid Sharia. What it requires us to do is preserving of social order in the community, ensuring well-being and virtuous living of human community, establish justice, eliminate prejudice, and elevate hardship. So when we look at the law introduced and the MCO order, yes, it is very much Sharia compliant, developed based on the government's, people see the minister coming and making announcement. However, behind that, we have a whole team of people working, including Prof. Awang and many people working behind the scene to produce a valuable, reliable, authentic, scientific information, social science, pure science, whatever, it's all very authentic information. We don't make a decision plucking out from the air. So I trust our government very much into all this. So when they make decision, it is to make sure that the impact of the business impact on all sectors are taken into account. Just briefly on the pandemic, during Prophet's time, there was this pandemic, and Muslims were advised to keep away from the places of pandemic, and also not to go and not to leave the place. Similarly, Muslims are encouraged, enjoined to take care of the life of other human beings. So this is what our government has been doing very, very diligently, providing healthcare, providing quarantine places. Now maybe we have some additional payment, but previously every financial obligation was absorbed by the government. Very, very commendable. And briefly looking at the principles of Maqasid Sharia, we have the 5 principles. We look at the preservation of property, loan moratorium, invoking the clause on forced merger, financial assistance, mediating disputes is very, very important. Preservation of property, preservation of intellect, guidelines for online teaching and learning. Our Tun mentioned about online learning. Yes, as an academic myself, Prof. Dato' Awang, you also, we are looking at how we're teaching and how we interact students through online. Yes, there are many opportunities as well as some weaknesses we need to address, mental health as well, physical health as well. And also when you have preservation of religion, to assure the Muslims, the fatwa was made. Fatwa is also law, Sharia, on congregational prayers and all other forms of religious activities for Malaysians, not only for Muslims. We have 6 major religions recognized in the country, not only Islam, but as a multiracial, multi-religious country. We respect other beliefs as well. So we bring in all this assistance to every person. And also we have preservation of life, providing healthcare, also in the gynecology clinic, healthcare centers. Everyone, people are not advised to go to hospital unless it's necessary. So there are many forms of protection, and also preservation of lineage is very interesting. The gynecology clinic also look at it, very interestingly. Every hospital staff, my daughter is also a medical doctor, so we can hear from them what they're doing. So much passion among the frontliners, and we on our part always have to advise, like Prof. Awang said, awareness to the public, the importance of observing the MCO. When we fail to observe the MCO, then it is offense against the law. With that, I rest my case. Thank you very much.
We thank you kindly, Professor Dr. Ainul Jaria bin Maidin, for the information on the initiatives, particularly the legal ones. Our next panelist is Yang Berusaha, Mr. Ahmad Razif bin Muhammad from Malaysian Industry Group, Malaysian Industry Government Group for High Technology, MITE. Mr. Ahmad Razif, we would like to know what sort of international collaboration that has emerged during the pandemic, and also how can the government act as catalysts in driving and introducing innovations, especially in the public sector. You have the floor, Mr. Ahmad Razif.
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.
Very good morning to everyone. Let me share my slides. Everyone can see my slides, huh? Oh, sorry. So, okay, first and foremost, I would like to thank the organizers, IKIM, for inviting Mike to give our point of view on this particular topic. Perhaps I'll just give a short introduction about MITE. MITE basically stands for Malaysian Industry Government Group for High Technology. So basically we act as a platform for industry and government to come together and actually work on high technology areas. We were around since 1993. We started off in aerospace and then move on to automotive, shipbuilding, ship repair, and so forth. And for now, we look at into new emerging areas like fourth industrial revolution and etc. and things like that. So, and then for today's the first question that was asked was about what sort of international collaboration has emerged during the pandemic. So before I talk about what sort of international collaboration, but I think it's important to understand that international collaboration, it's really, really important even without the pandemic itself. Even 5 to 6 years ago, we were already starting to talk about fourth industrial revolution. We're starting to talk about the Sustainable Development Goals. So no person, no organization, or even a country can actually, solve today's global challenges, let alone a pandemic. So it is really, really important for us, to strengthen our relationship together. This just for everyone's information. One of my portfolio that I look after is basically a bilateral program between Malaysia and UK, which is called the Newton Umpama Fund. So we have started it since 2014 actually, but the true impact that we saw is from 2016 to 2020. It has the return of investment was 33%. We're able to commercialize international based projects. This is one of the projects that I actually look after. If you can see in the middle slides, there is the green data center. So basically this technology comes from the translational research from the Newton Umpama Fund. We just spent a few million to support this project, but the investment from the Japan to Malaysia was 1.2 billion, and the technology site, the project is in Bandar Instead. So this is actually a good case study. So why international collaboration is really, really important. But coming closer to the topic that we're discussing today, in late 2019, I would think this is sort of like a blessing in disguise. And also, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is actually the best partner of all. So in late 2009, Malaysia basically hosted the Kuala Lumpur Summit, and Mike was actually invited to bring like-minded organizations to actually work on bringing together expertise, and also to work on how we can bring increased capabilities and capacities of Ummah with science, technology, innovation. So we have done the previous model with the Newton Umpama Fund. So we were thinking of doing the same thing for this, but at a multilateral platform. So for this, we actually has established what we call the ICOE, or International Center of Excellence, which involves countries from Turkey, Pakistan, Indonesia, and also we're trying to explore as well with Qatar. So the idea is basically it's a virtual COE that encourages and facilitates the sharing of expertise, insights, and the best practices among the countries. Of course, we want to increase the capabilities and capacities of for all the countries, and it will benefit the Muslim majorities as a whole. And it's actually a strategic platform to actually enhance the existing bilateral projects. So as you can see in terms of the focus area, this was during the time of end of 2018, the focus area there was many areas that we want to talk about. But then when COVID-19 came in, that has become the main priority for this set of students, because what we saw that when COVID-19 hits, it actually impacted the collaboration, not just this one, but even also with the collaboration with UK. So we had to change very, very quickly to ensure that things are moving fast. So just to share also, the strategic intent of for us doing this ICOE, one is we want to create interdependence among Muslim countries. So basically we want to, don't want to depend on Western technology And as I think the World Economic Forum has, they started to coin about the Great Reset. I think this is actually a great time for us to, to work together to build, our own technology from our Muslim brothers and sisters. And then also we want to increase the investment and trade and also employment. I mean, just to share with everyone, our trades between the countries is only between 1 to 7%. So there are room for improvement in this area. And also we want to enable integration among communities. We don't want other Muslims to be left out from the technology and development that we're doing. So everyone should be given the equal opportunity to actually receive this technology. So basically, this is for the question 1 that I'm answering, and then I think moving on to the question 2, how can the government act as a catalyst in driving and introducing innovation? Honestly speaking, I think the government may not have, innovation moves really quickly, so government may not be able to introduce it quickly. Innovation may move even faster than we think, because exponential technologies has been disrupting traditional industries at ever increasing pace. There's two very classical case study that we can highlight here. One is the Grab versus the taxis, and the other one is the hotel versus Airbnb. So those things are it created problems for the government in previous years. And now when the pandemic comes in, it basically changes everything. Everything has become so fast. Everybody has to adopt quickly. And this is where we have never seen before the opportunity to actually rewrite the entire sector, redefine the problems that we address, and also reinvent the solution. So in terms of the future that we were thinking about, there's 3 things that we need to keep in mind. One, there is something new that's going to happen. Like for example, we have been talking about the work from home. Those are something that's new. There's something that's going to shift. The shift of behavior, shift of consumer behavior. Like for example, for me personally, since I've been working at home quite often, so I do have to, order Grab for my foods, for doing lunch, or even my groceries. So those are the new things that I've been doing for the past 1 year. And there's something discontinued. I think one of the things that we saw that was continued was the movie theater, but I think recently they're trying to open it back up. So I think that's something good news for the entertainment industry. But in terms of the trends that we see overall, these are the 5 trends that we see that's still going to define the post-pandemic futures. Because it's really not just about the COVID that we need to address, but we also need to think about the new normal and also what's going to happen if there is a new pandemic that's coming after that. I mean, it's a process that we actually need to think about. So the first trend that we see is one, infection control. We like it or not, if we're able to control the COVID-19, we still need to wear masks, we still need to hand sanitize our hands, we still need to check our temperature wherever we go. Remote work and commerce, that is there already, even in classroom as well. There's not going to be bound of geographical location and to conduct businesses and commerce. Improve resiliency. I think this is going to be one of the main themes for the years to come because we need to actually increase our local self-reliance because as borders is still closing, we need to rethink our supply chain. We need to be more localized. I'll give you an example. For a normal car, there's about 30,000 parts and they are internationally placed everywhere. It just takes one country to just close down, you cannot make a car. That's how disruptive this pandemic is. So this is something that all of us have to think about the supply chain, how to make it shorter, how to make it more localized. Better agility, I think this is also another big thing that's going to be years to come. Policies, practices of technology, and then the process needs to be flexible and also be adaptable. And last but not least is the macroeconomic impacts. We are going to see different scenarios in the future of, how it's going to impact the countries as, when every time a pandemic strikes, things are going to happen. Every time we implement MCO, things are going to change. So when you put all of these trends together, it's really going to be business unusual. We're not going to go back to pre-COVID. We are going to move to a new normal, and we do actually need to prepare for the next pandemic if it ever happens. I think the experts will like Dr. Wong will probably can see more about this later on, I think. But really, the government role has to act as a catalyst to actually accelerate the development, because we cannot stop. We need to keep moving. And this is basically a framework that might uses to, to undertake strategic policies, like, for example, the industry forward from MITI. We use this framework, FIRST first. Basically means F is for funding and financial, I, infrastructure institutes, R is the regulations and policies, S, skill and talents, T, and technology. So this is basically a sort of like a big dashboard. Not only it tells you what we need to do to move forward, but who actually needs to be to do the task. Like, for example, in terms of funding, mostly has announced the Malaysia Grant Challenge, and there's 5 new funds out there for people to explore. Sorry,
Mr. Marazim, could you conclude in 1 minute?
Sure, no problem. This is actually my last slide. So again, this framework is very, very useful for the government. We have been using it for various ministries for strategic policies, and even at program level, it's robust enough. It is robust for us to to manage what's the problem now and how we actually take ourselves to the future. And most importantly, apart from international collaboration, the partnership is important there for us to be strengthened, for us to actually to move forward. Thank you. I think that's my presentation. Thank you.
Many thanks, Mr. Razif, for highlighting the impacts of pandemic on public service, and also in highlighting the trends that will define our post-pandemic futures. We move on next to our 4th panelist yang berusaha, Madam Noria binti Harun, Deputy Director Ethics and Value Development Program Sector, Islamic Education Division, Ministry of Education, Malaysia. Now, Madam, when the movement control order was introduced, schools were closed, lessons were conducted online. So in your esteemed view, what are the challenges faced by students and teachers in the situation, and what are the initiatives and innovations that were introduced to mitigate and facilitate learning in this situation? The floor is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, Yang Bahagia Tun, Chairman of IKIM, panelists, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, thank you for invitation to this webinar expert consultation to speak on the implications of COVID-19 from an educational perspective. Well, back to the question for me just now. When MCO was introduced, schools were closed and lessons are conducted online. What are the challenges faced by students and teachers in this situation, and what are the initiatives and innovations introduced to mitigate the situation? All right. When we talk about new norms, new situations that have to be faced by all Malaysians in all matters, then inevitably the impact is huge. However, life has to go on, but this time continued at home via online. A new situation, even a little bit strange at first. In fact, it is very weird to some students, so definitely lead to many challenges. We imagine learning that previously took place in the classroom, in the lab, in the workshop at school, with the teacher before them teaching, and the students attentively listening while copying notes, the teacher asking questions and the student answering. The teacher can watch the student and do reflection face to face, has suddenly changed. Pupils and teachers are in their respective homes, no longer face to face. But learning process still has to continue. Allah said in Surah Al-Mujadalah, rise up, Allah will rise up to ranks and degrees those of you who believe and who have been granted knowledge. So, the Malaysian Education Development Plan 2013-2025 has stated that every student has access to education to achieve their potential, to face the future life. Students are therefore entitled to have the opportunity to pursue education, even if they do not attend school. And online learning has been introduced. In the beginning of the first MCO, all kinds of challenges has been faced. No internet access, no devices, students disappearing from the screen, and many other challenges that are stressful to many. Allah said in Surah Az-Zumar, those who listen to the word and follow the best meaning in it, those are the ones who Allah has guided, and those are the one endured with understanding. Thus, the teaching and learning manual at home has been developed to help teachers implement home-based teaching and learning, PDPR, as an alternative to learning new norms so that students do not drop out. This manual is also a reference for school administrators, PPD officers, JPN officers, and KPM divisions, and is always improved by taking into account the basic principles of education, namely, the first, no students drops out of learning. Second, the basic of learning are made based on content standards and learning standards that are delivered through various methods, while teachers need to implement a fair and comprehensive assessment. And third, the social-emotional well-being of students is given priority. So, with this teaching and learning manual, the home-based teaching and learning takes place online and offline. First, we look at home-based teaching and learning online, which occurs when there is internet access and the use of devices that allow students to learn in real time based on a schedule set by the school. And they use learning platforms such as Digital Educational Learning Initiative Malaysia, Delima, Cikgu Tube, Imurabi, EduWeb, TV, and social media applications. Or they use applications such as Google Meet or Microsoft Teams live streaming, or via e-games, gamifications, videos, audio clips, e-books, and online recordings, or online assignments. Then what about challenges to students and to teachers? Yes, when it comes to challenges, it's pretty much the same, cannot be counted. Internet line is a very important issue because not all of Malaysia has good internet coverage. In some areas, the coverage is very slow. In some areas, there is no coverage at all, causing students and teachers to feel disappointed. The truth is, sometimes only the teachers are online, while the students are somewhere else. They cannot leave the house to go to places that have coverage, as they are advised to stay home and stay safe. Therefore, home-based teaching and learning offline is also being used as an option to solve the problem. Plus, this offline method is without internet access all the time. But students still learn to use devices such as computers, laptops, tablets, or mobile phones. Teaching and learning materials in the form of video, audio, slides, notes, and exercises from the platforms that I have mentioned earlier, such as Delima, Cikgu Tube, EduWeb TV, Imorabi, and others, are downloaded by teachers when there is internet access, to be given to students through appropriate communication mediums, stored in computers, tablets, and gadgets, and they can learn afterwards, even without internet access. This is very helpful, especially to students who rely on the devices and internet lines of their parents, or students from areas that are slow or having problems with internet coverage. The challenge, yes, it is still exists. As I mentioned earlier, not all students have device facilities, internet, and so on. Therefore, several alternative approaches are also used, such as the preparation of learning modules according to each subject given to students through the easiest distribution methods. In fact, for students who face internet access difficulties, the home-based teaching and learning method is also existed through educational TV broadcasts on OK TV channels, Astro Tutor TV, and Didik TV and NTV7 with a total broadcast time of 11 hours per day for the benefit of students, teachers, and parents. And from 27th January 2021, the Didik TV and NTV7 program was broadcast, specifically for SPM candidates in 2020 to help them to prepare. So this is one of the initiatives used by KPM as a solution to the challenges faced by students, teachers, and parents in ensuring children are not left behind in learning just because of the occurrence of a pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, KPM is also grateful and very much appreciate to NGOs and certain individuals who came forward to help KPM to ensure that students' home-based teaching and learning run smoothly. They help to increase internet access in certain areas and help with gadgets and devices for those who can't afford it. And Alhamdulillah, the current situation has also been seen to be more positive. With fewer COVID positive cases, schools have also started to open in stages with strict compliance with SOPs. However, online and offline learning initiatives and alternatives are continued as appropriate and as a flavor enhancer to the learning process. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all pray that our children will always have success in this world and the hereafter, and our teachers will always be resilient and patient in the face of various unexpected issues in the life of the new norm. Allah said, "La tahzan, inna Allaha ma'ana." So I think that's all from me. Thank you. Back to you, Mr. Moderator. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikum salam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And we thank you, Madam Noya, for giving us an insight on the initiatives and innovations being introduced by the Education Ministry. Speaking about initiatives and innovations, our next panelist is yang berusaha, Mr. Azwan bin Baharudin, Country Managing Director, Accenture Malaysia. As an expert on digitalization trends, could you please share with us on how has the pandemic accelerated the process of digitalization in Malaysia, and also what is your comment on the impact on the various sectors in the country from the pandemic to the impact of digitalization? You have the floor, Mr. Azwan.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum, salam sejahtera dan selamat pagi kepada semua para panelis di muzakarah pakai ini. Yang amat berbahagia Tun Ahmad Sarji, penerusi IKIM, yang berusaha Tuan Moderator, Saudara Muhammad Husni Muhammad Amin. Thank you for the invitation. Well, look at us now. I don't have any slides. I will speak for 10 minutes. In fact, I was just sharing with the team yesterday that if I have slides, I think that one slide will take me 2 hours. So, we churn PowerPoint like nobody's business. So I thought it'd be easier for me just to speak about it, to share my experience of what is really happening on the ground, in the market, in the private sector, perhaps, right? But look at us now. We are using Zoom, we're using Microsoft Teams. We're not traveling, we are using, as many of the panelists were saying earlier, we're far more digital today than we ever were. We're using our apps to check in, MySejahtera. We are using QR codes to pay or to enter buildings, to do many more things. We are using apps to order food. We're using apps to check our balances at EPF, for example. Right, but let me firstly introduce you to who Accenture is. So Accenture, so I joined Accenture about 4 years ago in March 2017, and it's a company that it's about over 500,000 employees worldwide, and it's a company that does 4 things. It does strategy and consulting as one business. technology as another business, operations or BPO is another business, and it's quite big. And the other bit is what we call Exemption Interactive, which basically means actually right now we're the world's largest digital agency in the world. So when I joined in 2017, we were 2,000 people in Malaysia, and now 4 years later, we are over 8,000 people strong in Malaysia itself. I'm still hiring. I've got 320 open positions in Exemption Malaysia, all mainly digital related or new technology related, cloud security, AR, machine learning, just imagine. So please do take a look at my LinkedIn and go find the jobs, because there's plenty of jobs out there, despite the massive fear by a lot of people about how digital will displace employment, perhaps. You know, in fact, when we started the MCO process, where we couldn't go to the office, I had to shift 4,000 desktops to people's homes and get all the dongles running and make sure people can work from office. We got to secure their access. We got to ensure connectivity. We also got to ensure that people's well-being are well taken care of. Because the world has changed. You know, the term I would use is, the Accenture actually uses, is never normal. Because there's no such thing as even new normal. You know, I think it's something that we anticipated. Business as usual, yes, but the business as usual is the new way of life, right? You know, in fact, Accenture today is 95% working in the cloud. Okay, but the question that we have is, you know, when we look at the impact of digital, apart from what you see day to day, you know, we have a question of increasing revenue, which is getting market access for most people or companies, or doing cost takeout. And cost takeout is something that has been going on for many years. We've been using lots of technologies, platforms, core systems, methodologies, you know, to do cost takeout. But the key to the new universe in winning here is getting access to new customers and also new revenues. You know, the thing that I have experienced in Malaysia primarily, because I see a lot of neighboring countries are surging ahead beyond Malaysia. So I'm saying this as a concerned Malaysian, because I know Thailand is flying high, right? They're doing, you know, everything they do is blockchain, everything they do is digital. You know, we help them, you know, when looking at distributing cash or registering for the similar to MySejahtera, we help them launch an app within 5 days, right? But they're able to do that. They can make such fast decisions, but we can't somehow, right? Indonesia, you know, used to be far behind in my rear view mirror, but now they're just over my shoulder. In Singapore, tak boleh cakap, Singapore is so far ahead, right? So then when I speak to CEOs, you know, they tell me, Azwan, I'm not the pioneer. I want to be a fast follower. But my complaint, maybe my observation is when somebody says I'm a fast follower, I'm sorry, but you are 5 years behind, right? And then the first thing you want to do is create a blueprint. You know, how many blueprints do we need? How many blueprints do we have? It's great, but you know, you got to start. You know, how many blueprints have we had? Strategy documents if we had, you put in the shelf and never do anything, right? So and then the last year, let me explain to you what happened the last year. The last year was, you know, at the very beginning. So, you know, we were urging our clients to let's connect, let's discuss, let's see how we can turn it around, because we've seen all the our European and American counterparts move very, very quickly. And then we couldn't even get a meeting because people were afraid to meet up. And I said, use Microsoft Teams, perhaps, right? But no, they rather not meet, right? This is literally what happened last year, right? So then what happened when people realized that it's going to take some more time, then people started to change their attitude and their thinking, right? Because at the beginning, they were only thinking of how do I work today? You know, since I cannot go to office, if I don't have a laptop, I don't have access to office resources, I don't have a means of communication apart from my mobile phone, then how do I work? And suddenly they're thinking, oh, maybe this thing will stay and then therefore will take some time. So everybody was frozen for the longest of times because they thought things would return to normal, but it's not so. And that's the problem that we have. We look and see. By the time we take action, 2 labs have passed and we are doing catch up. And it's very frustrating for me. But however, I was in a situation where in November last year, I had excess staff. I'm thinking, what am I going to do? Because the clients are not, adopting digital as quickly as they should. But come this year, I'm fully sold out. I am literally sold out at this point in time. I've got 8,000 people sold out, right? So now, if you think about what clients are doing today, they're doing many things. So, but even then, right? The other problem that we have is connecting businesses to rural folk, because rural folks don't have access, right? So my digital, master plan was great, blueprint, right? Was great. So we want to give access to people in rural areas, right? And then we are doing also, for example, to travel. We got we had this conversation with the airlines. Middle of last year, we said you need to do KTDI, which is known traveler digital identity, which is now being adopted by IATA for travel. And they said, well, that's not our problem, that's the government's problem. But then now you see, in order to travel, you need a passport that's digital. You no touch, right? You got your ticket, and you have your your health certificate. They need to store online, right? So everything today, the customers are moving quickly towards customer experience. Customer experience is where the new battle is, and that's where people are scrambling to go after, right? And then suddenly, but while the Malaysian companies are trying to learn how to grasp the digital, how to access customer, how to change the entire process to digital, because everything is falling apart. You got companies like Grab, who is grabbing everything, You got Lazada, Shopee, Zalora, who is taking everything. You got real estate companies which are going bust because, there's clearly overcapacity, right? Exhibition halls, travels, hotels are a problem. AirAsia did a fantastic job. They said, well, since I'm not flying, I'm going to pivot internally and do digital. So they've pivoted their business and they're all digital, right? So but what we do is we help companies, oil and gas companies, gamification, try to change and impact culture, help some of our clients change the way people buy cars, right? So, so there are many things happening. So even healthcare, online, people are seeing doctors, they don't have to queue. They go speak to doctors over their phones. We're using financial e-wallets. There are probably too many e-wallets, if you ask me, because we go to the shop, we don't know which QR code to use, right? But retail, for example, I had a company who only sold 60,000 units of a particular product online. And I did a revenue sharing deal with them, and within 3 months, I already sold 600,000 units or whatever they're selling for the entire year, right? So telcos want to become digital. They want to enable their own customers. Logistics is also key. It's being stressed out because everything is delivery. And we've got, looking at how do you digitalize your distribution management system for manufacturers, from your factory floor to warehouse to your sales to the shop, etc. So there are many things that's happening. As you know, the impact of various sectors of the country is massive.
Mr. Azwan, could you conclude in 1 minute?
Yes, I can.
Right.
So the challenge that we have is we're always looking to our neighbors, looking at other big companies to see what they're doing. The opportunity that we have is actually we can forge ahead because our economy is largely insulated. We can, like Korea did many, many years ago, strengthen the few companies that exist in the country so that we're able to export them. So I think there are a lot of opportunities still for digitalization. I think that if we think that the argument that we have accelerated our digitalization, yes, I agree, but there's so much more to go. I think only 10% of the 90% we have not achieved that. So I'm looking forward to the complete pivoting of our nation, and it all begins with conversations like this. So thank you, Saudara Rusni, for inviting me.
Okay, thank you for those very interesting inputs crammed into. I wish we have more time for every panelist. So our next panelist is a captain of industry when we talk about manufacturing. So we have Yang Berbahagia Dr. Rizal Khairi bin Ahmad, Chief Executive Officer of Nano Malaysia Berhad will come back. We missed you from our last time engagement here on AI. So, Dr. Rizal, what are the innovations introduced in the manufacturing industry in Malaysia during the pandemic? How have we adapted, and what are the challenges faced by the manufacturing sector to adapt to these changes? You have the floor, Dr. Rizal.
Can you hear me, by the way?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. An honor indeed to be here among esteemed and distinguished speaker. I would like to present in the context and as a response to the question posed by Mr. Moderator, Encik Rusni. So from the context of Nano Malaysia, being a government agency responsible in enabling the whole industrial ecosystem from the nanotech perspective, I'll give you a bit of the tip of the iceberg that we have orchestrated in terms of coordinating the response that has been led by us in 2020 when the MCO started and at the cusp of the pandemic. So I'd like to start with this, especially from my favorite surah from Al-Quran pertaining to nanotech. Whoever does an atom's weight of good shall see it, and whoever does an atom's weight of evil shall see it. So from the nanotech perspective, we're dealing with structural augmentation, molecular augmentation at a nanoscale. So what we do here, even though it's small, but the impact is huge. So from the scientific perspective, we can always align it back with the truth that was descended upon us through the Holy Book of Al-Quran. So what we did in the first phase in responding from the innovation perspective, where the MCO started in March, then the whole nation responded as a whole of government. We have the Majlis Keselamatan Negara, and I think the first strategy adopted by the government back then was towards population screening. That was initially the aspiration, and the initial target was roughly about 16,500 tests per day. So that provided the impetus of an idea of which MOSTI, through Nano Malaysia, through our partners, through a collaborative platform where we congregate a number of local players, startups, SMEs, and whatnot, in the name of collaboration for the betterment of the country, so that we can speed up the process for us to exit the MCO, the pandemic, in a expedited manner. So we had this idea about helping the frontliners by establishing or ideating this concept of a screening booth. Because we know for a fact on a daily basis, a single PPE, personal protection equipment, can put a burden of 200 ringgit per set. So imagine if you were to conduct 16,500 tests per day, that would cause a huge dent on the government's coffers. So the concept of the screening booth, of which we create a very safe environment for the frontliners to interact, to conduct tests, conduct swab tests, so on and so forth, will alleviate the financial burden potentially to allow for population screening back then in the early days of the MCO, March, April. And the application of nanotech per se, such as antiviral nanocoating, provided enhanced protection to allow for greater level of comfort and assurance. So this antiviral coating here has been proven in many areas where they have been proven to deactivate a number of viruses, such as the H1N1. So by the view of scientific conjecture, we believe that it can still harm and deactivate SARS-CoV-2, which is the virus causing COVID-19. And the air sterilizer, whatnot, so on and so forth. So they provided an additional line of protection, reducing the financial burden by the government to conduct population screening back then. So this comes under the national initiative called Antiviral Execution National Group for Emergency Response, or in short, Avengers, just to get people excited and to put some level of sexiness into it, for the lack of a better term. So moving forward, so the latest data suggested that viral transmission is primarily by air. Surface contamination, yes, but not to a certain extent. In the early days of the pandemic, yes, we still have to adhere to the SOPs such as washing hands, sanitizing, and making sure things are clean. But the data suggests that the viral transmission is primarily airborne, those aerosols. So this came up, it created a push to the idea that we need to sterilize the air indoor, not necessarily outdoor, because at outdoor, the percentage of viral transmission reduced by a massive amount of 40%. So in indoor environments such as shopping malls, in a tight environment such as aeroplanes, LRT, MRT, subways, and so on and so forth, we view that having a clean, sterilizing air using this nano-coated solution, which is able to literally deactivate those virus at a molecular, aerosol, or even when lens through those HEPA filters, will provide an option for us to reopen the economy. I do support in terms of the digital initiation where everything digitalized, long distance learning, digital learning platform, the new norms, so on and so forth. But you have to understand that as humans, whether you're introverts or extroverts, we are primarily a social creature. You need to interact physically. Business negotiation needs to be face-to-face because you cannot remove the human touch. Eye to eye, body language, the right intonation, and direct engagement to seal the deal or to really communicate from your heart. That's where there is a line to be drawn, or where how far digitalization can take. So having an option for us to reopen the economy and certain sectors through technologies such as this would allow us to move ahead. Rather than, I agree with the previous presenter, the wait and see and whatnot. There's a lot of innovation out there that we can use to reopen a certain semblance of the new economy. We may not be reverting to the old version, but I think a hybrid version of the new world where digital is still prevalent, but at the same time, you need to understand the human psychology. You need to interact, you need to see each other, you need to really create that warm channel in interaction. But closer to your personal protection, another innovation of us, which we have deployed in a more limited manner, is your face mask. Yeah? The normal standard face mask is great, yes. The outer layer is it tends to be water repellent, but we promise an added advantage of protection. We put a layer of antiviral coating to allow for viral, bacterial deactivation using nanoparticles and such. So if you happen to be in a place where there is a positive case and there's some aerosol floating in the air, and you're wearing an added protection, so you feel that, well, the chances of you getting infected is much lower compared to a standard mask. So then came another layer of initiative. I think it was a challenge thrown by the government, because if you look at the PPEs, because we already have this frontliner approach, because they provide that defense for all of us. Because if you protect our defender, the defender will protect us and all. So they call it herd protection as opposed to herd immunity. So the problem faced by the frontliners is they're wearing a very heavily padded, heavily layered PPEs. They get sweaty, they get hot. So you need to provide some level of comfort. So a challenge thrown at us at the material level is they're going to say, can you do anything to provide some cooling effect? Yes, we do. There is a nanomaterial that has in place that can thermally conduct, remove heat almost immediately. So there's something is an ongoing process for us. While the pandemic is still around us, the first thing to do is think about the frontliners. If they are well protected, they're comfortable, then the so-called shield around us will be there in a sustainable manner. And of course, it covers into gloves as well, antiviral coating. This is a work in progress because we're responding quickly, and considering that the pace of innovation now is moving so quickly at an expedited manner, super fast, we are able to roll out, I think this innovation should be by the end of the year. I think earlier on, Professor Bugilbang mentioned about PCR tests, rapid test kit and whatnot. Yeah, this is crucial from the innovation perspective, even to help and to assist some of the manufacturing sectors to open up. Because more manufacturing sectors are automated, so it's fine. You can literally jump into the IoT, remote control. But what if in the sectors that require, hands-on work, physical presence? So we're looking at reopening, those sectors, manufacturing or not, to allow for workers to come back, but in a controlled manner with SOP. So we have identified a solution here using gold nanoparticles, which allows us to literally detect the presence of antigen over 2 minutes. So over 2 minutes, negative result. If you're negative, we push you into the factory, or even we can open up conferences, so on and so forth. So there will be some semblance of the old normal that can be reactivated back using a super fast rapid test kit, 2 minutes. Positive result over 15 minutes. So, but for positive result need to be reconfirmed using PCR test because this will be the gold standard. But this gives us that filtration. If you look at a funnel, so you're able to push through those negative so-called people in to conduct whatever they need to do on a daily basis, whereas the positive one, you push them away to be reconfirmed using PCR tests. So that would open up the various sectors, tourism, for example, manufacturing, those hospitality sectors, so on and so forth. Those are critical areas that requires mobility of people. Else, you'll see disruption and then eventual sunset of those sectors. Next, alternative to vaccine. Yes, vaccine would be the primary protection for all, but there are other options out there that will allow us to arrest, and to prevent the spread of this viral transmission. Recent research has suggested that this nasal spray going straight up to where the virus enter our body, if you were to block it, deactivate the so-called, literally shut the door, you are able to literally reduce the viral loading into the body and preventing from the replication and the production of the virus in the body. So we're talking about this literally like the small nanoparticles we're able to present the ACE2 receptor there, which primarily interacts with the individual spikes in the protein, the RBD, that will cause the virus to penetrate, replicate, and therefore causing the illness prevalent. So you can see here, things are being slowly accepted as an alternative to vaccination. So this is something that I think we should also consider to be a secondary mainstream option on top of vaccination. Again, it's disruptive, something which is not entirely being discussed openly in a mainstream manner. So enough with the solution addressing the current situation, the pandemic, firefighting, but we have to look at long term. So echoing to what Mr. Razif has mentioned about way forward, we need to ensure that there is a necessary story for us to undertake. Because while there is half of us looking at fighting the pandemic, half of it should focus on strategic direction, moving the country forward, creating new ecosystem, creating new opportunities. Now we are at the first year of technically the South Malaysia plan. There must be a game plan. There's a recent announcement from My Digital have put in place 3 phases, right? Digitalization, so on. But my interest is phase 3, getting Malaysia to be a net exporter of digital tech, at least regionally. So phase 3 is, it starts 2006 to 2030, but I believe phase 3 can start now because you need to start to build the building blocks of innovation in Malaysia to allow for us not becoming just user of technology, but developer. So this will present new entrepreneurship, new job opportunity for us to go beyond, because the pandemic has destroyed many jobs, has taken away mata pencarian for a lot of us. So we need to create a whole new ecosystem designed for this new norm, or whatever you want to call it. So you need to have that. And furthermore, the pandemic COVID-19 also revealed weaknesses in our supply chain. There's a lot of things that we could not access in 2020. Food, so on and so forth. So we need to understand that Malaysia needs to start to localize some of the key supply chain. Mr. Razif mentioned about technology. Yes, we need to develop them, produce it here. So the principle of develop, make, and deploy. We need to ensure that we have all those in Malaysia. And that will create a sustainable development of technology in Malaysia and creating new economic opportunities. So the building blocks needs to be looked at. We need to focus. We may not be able to do all. Malaysia is a small country, 32 or 33 million people strong. So we have to look at able to proceed. Okay. Last but not least, my closing presentation here is with regards to treating people from the Islamic perspective. You say here, treat people as you like to be treated. From Sahih Muslim, whoever would love to be delivered from hellfire and admitted to paradise, let him meet his end with faith in Allah and the last day. Let him treat people as he would love to be treated. The cases in Kelang reveal that part of us. You see? The factories in Kelang. I shall not name names, but you know what and who. You see, we treated our immigrant brothers and sisters in a subhuman manner. We confined them into substandard, living conditions. And what happened? When the viral transmission happens, it comes back back at us as a society. Yeah? It comes back at us with full force. So Selangor saw numbers, unprecedented numbers. So here you need to do some bit of retrospective self-reflection, that how you want to treat people. They may be foreigners, immigrants, so on and so forth, but they are as human as you and me. So treat people as how you like to be treated, and that would be the fundamental core of Islamic principle, because nothing will heavier in the day of judgment other than your good manners. So treat people the best possible manner, treat them nicely, you're able to contain the virus. I think this is a lesson still to be learned by a lot of people around the world. With capitalism, demarcation, separation, disproportionate distribution of wealth will create future pandemics. So in ensure to have full access, equal access to all, we need to make sure that everyone has some equitable access to what needs to be accessed accordingly. So that would be my 2 cents in providing the COVID-19 Islamic response. Thank you so much.
Thank you kindly, Dr. Rizal, for sharing us the work that you and Nano Malaysia are doing, especially with regards to the manufacturing industry, to ensure that jobs continue. So we come to our last but not the least panelist, yang berusaha Mr. Iskandar Mirza bin Muhammad Yusof, Senior Director, Strategic Planning, Tourism Malaysia. Now the question is, Mr. Iskandar, tourism is one of the biggest contributors to the country's GDP. What are the initiatives and innovations introduced to minimize the impacts of the pandemic on tourism? You have the floor, Mr. Iskandar. Mr. Iskandar, are you with us?
Yes, okay,
All right.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Rosni. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And very good morning. Yang bahagia Tuan Mat Saji, panelists and ladies and gentlemen. Today I will give you an angle in terms of tourism industry. As you know, tourism industry is a service industry. How the service industry really changed in the past 1 year due to this pandemic COVID-19. All right. On the first questions, the socio-economic impacts of the pandemic on tourism. The first 3 months, as you know, in the history of the pandemic, the first 3 months, the tourism industry in Malaysia was good in 2020. However, since we closed the border on the 18th of March 2020, the scenario totally changed, yeah. And from March onwards, we have a decrease of arrivals into Malaysia. The impact of it, yes, first of all, there is a decrease in tourism revenue by 85.3%, for 2020 compared to 2019. Yeah, we only got 12.7 billion ringgit in terms of international tourists for the whole year 2020. Secondly, when it comes to the international tourist arrival, yes, when the border closed, we got there is no people comes to our shore for the purpose of traveling for leisure or holidays. Yeah? Those who come here is only for essential business for specific reasons. As a result, there is a decrease of international tourist arrival by 83.4% for 2020 compared to 2019. We only received 4.3 million tourists in 2020. Yeah. And however, this is actually according to the UNWTO, United Nations World Tourism Organizations, where they expect more or less about the same percentage of decrease of arrival to the Southeast Asian country. Yeah? Thirdly, there is a direct sectoral impact to the industry as a whole. Those who are involved directly or indirectly with the tourism industry, such as the air travels, the tourisms and hospitality. Yeah, and even for us, we try to do several initiatives for that, and we can see that even the domestic tourists also, when they are less respond on the airlines, people like to travel by themselves if they travel within our own country. Yeah, and we've done a survey, and we can see that there is a change in the demand of people. People prefer to go to the beach and also nature, less crowded area, and most importantly, people are looking into hygiene factors. Yeah, so these are the things that there is a change in the trend of where people go and their needs when travel. Yeah. Number 4, there's a closure of hotels and accommodation facility across Malaysia. Yes, since the March, there's so many hotels, business is not so good for them. Some of them still survive, but some of them, they have to close down, whether it's temporary or permanently. Yeah. 5th, the travel restriction due to the MCO. So there's a lot of travel restrictions. So I hope this is something that is not only in Malaysia, it's all over the world. Yeah. And 6, there is increasing of unemployment rate on the tourism sector. As this is also in echo to the point number 7 during Tun's speech just now, which how it impact the economics of the country. Yeah? So this is impact the whole tourism industry as a whole. Yeah? And overall, this also calls for the attentions towards digitalization. Yeah? From a service industry point of view, now, which normally work with physical or human being touch, now we have to do everything into digitalizations. The promotions, the way operates in hotels or the tourism product, everything need to be digitalizations. Yeah? Okay, some of the initiative and innovation introduced to minimize the impacts of the pandemic for this during this on the tourism sector. There are a few of the economic stimulus package. First, the tax relief. There is a full tourism tax exemption actually for the period from 1st July 2020 to 30th June 2021. Yeah. So this is for individual tax relief up to 1,000 ringgit for domestic tourism expenditure for those who travel within our own country. So actually during this time period, we are trying to make sure our domestic tourism is active because to make sure the economics stimulate. Yeah. So to help all those who are in the tourism industry. So secondly, ease of doing business. The government will use the hotel, electricity discount and rental exemption. This is one of some of the criteria that has been used for the last 1 year. Also grant and cash assistance, relaxation of matching grant criteria, and also grant for e-commerce platform, and also to support the tourist guide, tour bus driver, and also taxi driver. And number 4, to have also travel bubble, interstate travel between the RMCO states. This, I think, this quite recently being introduced. Yeah. And in terms of tourism, we also introduce what we call the package rangsangan economy, or the stimulus plan. This is in order to help the industry back again. First is to restore the confidence to travel, especially among Malaysian. We are using the KOL, social media influencers, and also to make sure that even the domestic tourism can be still active until the borders is open. For that kind of purpose, what we see is that people are right now looking for what we call experiential tourism. People are looking for how they experience in the tourism. Actually, for the last 1 year, when the MCO is active in Malaysia, people cannot go or travel or balik kampung itself. This has caused some psychological effects. So when you open even the initiative to open up some destination to travel, this has caused some what we call revenge tourism. So people are looking for places to go or get away during the weekends. So we are looking forward to work with the medias and so on in order the domestic tourism can gain. Secondly, to revive the domestic tourism, as mentioned just now, domestic tourism is the one that can help us at this point of time. So we are working closely with the hotel associations, to come so that they can come up with a good package to offer, even for every sectors, even for the frontliners, also for the government workers and so on. So we are trying to initiative this kind of thing. We are working also with the travel tour associations, the local airlines, which produce, they can come up with special price, special discounts, transportations, GLC agency. Even for shopping, we are working closely with the shopping complex associations, the theme parks, and also even homestay. And to a certain extent, we are also working with the national parks and also zoo. Third is to maximize resources. This is collaboration with the ministry, state agency, local councils, their segment through the niche products to boost domestic tourism. This is something that, as mentioned just now, diving or ecotourism, people are looking for this kind of scenario right now, because when you go diving, there's not so many people. You can still make sure the SOP is there. Same thing when you go for ecotourism destination, like going to the national parks. So you can still follow the SOP, and this is what people are looking for nowadays. And also, we are also, as mentioned just now, incentive, rebate-based collaboration with industry players, so that we can target package so to boost the domestic tourism and also economic as a whole. So with that kind of stimulus, we hope the economy of the country will recover back, through the domestic consumptions among the Malaysians. So with that, that is my view in terms of the tourism industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Yang Berusaha, Mr. Iskandar, for sharing views, experience, and also on explaining to us the impact of the pandemic on tourism, and also the initiatives that have been taken to minimize those impacts. So, Alhamdulillah, we have heard from all the 7 panelists who have shared their views and opinions, as well as sharing their experience on the theme that we have focused on today, on COVID-19, especially also connecting them to the Islamic responses. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the end of our program, the expert consultation on COVID-19 Islamic responses. On behalf of the organizer, IKIM, I would like to express our deepest gratitude to Yang Amat Berbahagia Tun Ahmad Sarji bin Abdul Hamid for providing us with the thematic address that has guided very much our discussion today. I would like to record also our sincerest appreciation to all our 7 panelists for their very valuable contribution in the forms of experience, ideas, and also very enriching inputs. And thank you also to all observers and media practitioners who have followed us online on our FB Live and also TV IKIM. I would like to apologize for any shortcomings in the running of this expert consultation. Nonetheless, I hope that this program has been beneficial and informative for everyone, inshallah. A special thank you to the Secretariat and the technical team who have worked tirelessly to ensure the smooth running of the program. Again, thank you to everyone who have participated, contributed, and attended our program this morning till now. So on that note, I end this program with Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Wassalamu.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.